Hi, my name is Ray Fernando, and I'm here with Evan Armstrong. And today we're going to talk about AI prompting. And it's going to be a really fun-packed show. And just to let you know, my name is Ray Fernando, and I used to be an engineer at Apple for 12 years, and now I'm working on my own in AI. And I like to find really interesting people who are doing amazing things in AI. And I've actually recently bumped into Evan Armstrong. He's the author of Augtokit, which helps you convert compute and books into instruct tuning sets. That's a lot of words. So basically it just makes data gathering a painless step of the model creation process. So if you're an engineer, you're an enthusiast, if you're an entrepreneur looking to level up your prompting skills, this show is for you. So let's go ahead and kind of get into a little bit of these topics that we're going to cover to help you kind of up your game in your prompting. And so some of those things we're going to talk about today are going to be about open source versus closed source prompting. Few shots examples, kind of what they are and how effective they can be. Debugging prompts, because once you start making prompts, there's a lot of different problems that can happen from there, and how do you then debug them to make them better? Evan's a really great resource here, and he has many personal examples to do this as well. And then also the power of synthetic data generation. This is still a new field and new topic, and I feel like this is something that we can start exploring. This whole AI space is growing really, really fast, and I'm really happy to have you here, Evan. And yeah, so my first question, let's just get right into it. Open source versus closed source. Open source, you may have heard Llama 3 and some of these other models who have come out, and then closed source, for the people who are not familiar, are like your open AIs and your Claude AI systems, where they don't show you the weights and various things inside of what's kind of going on in the model. So Evan, let's just kind of go into that a little bit and like tell me the differences between the open source and closed source prompting like paradigms that you have.
Yeah, okay, that's a great question, and it's a very, very foundational one to prompt engineering. So, like, open source and closed source are entirely different paradigms because you're optimizing for different things. With closed source, the cost per token is usually very, very high. And if it isn't high, if you're using a small model, you're probably better off using open source anyway. So closed source models are typically very inflexible, meaning they do not learn from few shot examples very well. You need to focus on having a very detailed system prompt. It looks like a list of instructions. Typically, so you'll have your list of instructions and like an output indicator. You describe what kind of output format you want. Of course, it's a good question whether the AI actually follows that description very well. But you'll have your list of instructions and the description of what kind of output format you want. Typically, you'll repeat things that you really want to make certain that the AI does. Um, and because you're optimizing for cost, because the model is pretty powerful generalist by itself, you're trying to like trim down the size of the prompt and really make it like efficient, really like small surgical changes. Open source
Mm.
prompting is a different paradigm because cost per token is very low, and they also learn very well from examples. So whereas closed source prompts are more about creating a list of instructions, there's a camera. Yeah, closed source prompts are about creating a list of instructions. Open source models are about creating a perfect, or rather a flawless pattern, and then having the AI auto-complete that pattern. So like,
Mm.
they're like less, often less over RLHF. So they can like they're you know how models like foundation models are autocomplete basically. They're fed
Mm.
raw internet and trained to autocomplete it. Open source models do that task very nicely, so they can pick up on entirely novel patterns given in few shot examples. And when I say flawless, I chose that word very precisely because it's less about making certain that it's perfect, but making certain that you didn't introduce any flawed patterns that the AI will pick up on. The AI will usually correctly continue a pattern, but whether you gave it the right pattern to continue is another question. So
So
basically,
what's a
closed source is listening
example
to.
that you see like in your type of thing, just to kind of wrap this around
Mhm.
for some people who've been prompting this way? That like, what's an example in the closed source realm, and then how would you have to do that like maybe in the open source world?
Okay, so let's say you have a simple classification prompt. You want an AI to determine whether some message is like, I don't know, harmful or not. Say,
Mm.
let's take to pick a safety thing, the typical
Yeah.
moderation. Now, you probably use a zero-shot classifier for this specific task because lots of them are trained on this. But say you're using an LLM for this because LLMs you can control, you can add a reasoning step and they can reason about classification. That's nice. So having it classify something for harm or for safety, you might want with a closed source model, you would have a nice list of instructions describing what constitutes a harmful response, what constitutes a not harmful response. You describe what the output format is, etc. With a open source model, you'd have probably a minimal system prompt. You would explain the rules just for your own peace of mind in case you end up switching to a model that actually listens to the prompt. But then you would have maybe 3 or 4, well, 2 to 3 really for something this simple. It exists in the pre-training data. The model already kind of knows what the task is. 2 or 3 examples of like, here's a message, and then like that's a user message, and then AI message, harmful or not harmful, and then you have like 2 or 3 more. Typically, it takes about 2 examples to get a model learning a task. Well, if you are using an open source model and you use only 1 example, it tends to, I guess the word might be overfit to that example. It can often direct quote it or generalize poorly. If you're doing classification, there are 2 labels. If your example only has, like if you only have 1 example, it will often overpredict that 1 label. So if your only thing is harmful, then it might have a lot of false negatives, false positives. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, if it's a good analogy I like to use is like, if your examples are like teaching it a pattern. So it's like if you have a graph, if you have 1 point, you can draw any kind of line through that point. If you have 2 points, it constrains it much stronger, right? Yeah.
I see.
So that's
So
like kind of
it's
the
just a matter.
visualization of it.
Okay.
Giving
And
it a pattern to
how,
continue.
got it. How narrow would you go in scope, right? Because there are some problems I feel like right now, like let's just take one of my examples. Right now, I'm just trying to solve what I call the persona problem. In marketing, my friends are trying to sell various products, and I'm trying to launch my own products as an AI engineer. So I'm trying to go from 0 to MVP as fast as possible, as many times as possible. So with that, what I'm doing in Claude is like, hey, I'm trying to market towards, like people who are younger to do this thing because they want to find their doppelganger. And, so it's like, okay, how do I message that? And how do I create a persona for that? And so I say, go ahead and create a persona for this. And it tries to fill out, and it gives me like an example persona with some types of things like age, this, and so forth. And I guess it just knows a little bit about how to do that. So how would I then take this and try to see if I can get the open source model to give me something maybe just as good, or if not better than what I'm currently asking? Because ideally I would like some type of agent system in the future to do this, but the goal here is just to take this basic prompt, which is like generate a persona. How do I kind of do this maybe in the open source realm?
So it sounds like the task is
Like
taking users information and like filling out a profile, like filling out fields of information based on
Yes,
that.
yeah, like generate a persona for someone who can use this app called the Doppelganger app. And the Doppelganger is just people like to upload a photo of themselves and see if they look like a celebrity or see if they look like someone else. And so
Hmm.
in this case, I don't know the psychology of who would be using this and why. I'm hoping that the language model may have some type of insight into that. So I want to kind of start tapping into those data sets and any exploration or any type of things that can help us pull the correct persona that this can match, because like my goal is to
Oh, so like you
make
submit a
a,
photo and then you find who's similar to you. Is that kind of like the?
yeah, that's the app. So what I'm
Okay.
basically doing is making a landing page that's going to be the marketing. So I want the landing
Hmm.
page to have the exact words that can fit this person who's really interested in using this app. So it makes it feel like I'm speaking to them, because
Hmm.
I wouldn't use it myself, but it's something that maybe someone could use, right?
Yeah. Okay. In that specific case, so uh, it's like another common question is like when do you use open source? When do you use closed source? There are 2 cases where you really want to use, well, maybe 3, 2.5 cases where you really want to use closed source. Multilingual tasks. So like if you're translating everything open source pretty much specializes in English or one other language. They typically aren't very good at multiple languages. Then there is extreme long context reasoning. If you have 100,000 tokens and you want to generate a function that fits nicely into this code base, then you'll probably want something closed source. And the third one is multimodal. So in the case where you're snapping a photo of yourself and then generating, like trying to extract fields, like information based on that, the reliability of open source systems might not be quite good enough for you on that. Now, image AI is not my specialty. I'm very I'm not a multimodal. I haven't even used the open multimodal models. That's a hell of a thing to say 5 times fast. Multimodal models.
Right.
But yeah, no. I don't think you can use few shot examples with them, which would mean you need to use zero shot reasoning. It'd be tricky. Like
Mm.
you'd probably hallucinate a few facts about the person, and that would compromise the end user experience. So for
Ah.
multimodal, you'd want to use a closed source model. And I'm probably the biggest proponent of so many people. Basically, no one knows how to prompt open source models. I've seen everyone from model creators to PhDs to like you name an expert field, they have no idea how to prompt it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some things where you just need to use closed source because they're big, horribly under optimized, but they're generalists. And so if you
Ah.
have a task that is multimodal and like requires just sheer computational power because you can't make up for it with a cleverly crafted prompt, then closed source.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting because all of these kind of like take in the text strings and they do various things. And I was just kind of curious about like your experience there and how that would like sort of translate to like our prompting techniques. Because I might imagine other people who are also having similar questions. It's like, okay, which model do I use? How do you determine that? Like what's the output and how consistent? And for me, it's like I don't have a cost. I care more about quality of output. So which one's going to give me that? And so how do you go about gauging quality and like approach here, right? Like for me, I just want high quality. I
Okay.
don't care how much it costs. I mean, I sort of care, but I just don't want it to like be as much as hiring someone who can do copy, right? Let's just say my time is worth $300 an hour. So how do I, weigh that in if it's going to take me, 10 hours to do and generate copy? Like I'll either spend $3,000 on myself or go hire someone to write this copy for $300 or prompt a model and get it done in 5 minutes or something. So how do you kind of like, as this like scenario here, like weigh your
Yeah. So
options?
okay. So it really. So there are a few things. So one, if you're deploying to production, like if you're doing something at scale,
Hmm.
you'll probably want for 99.9% of tasks an open source model.
Hmm.
And the reason for this depends on your personality. For those of you who are greedy bastards, partially like myself, consider that the cost per token, per million tokens, of GPT 4.5 Turbo is $30 output, if I remember right. The cost per million tokens of Llama 370B, which is very close and in many ways superior in a lot of important ways, which we'll get to later. I'll get to in a second. Superior to GPT-4 Turbo. The cost of Llama
In
70B
English.
is about Llama 3, yeah, is 90 cents per million tokens output. So
That's
30x cost
massive.
savings. That is important for your margins.
Hmm.
And not only that, there are different levels of what you can use models for. So like
Okay.
in a certain cost bracket, it just becomes infeasible to use a model
Mm.
for bulk document annotation. You cannot use GPT-4 for crawling your personal notes and summarizing things or retrieving things because it would simply be too expensive.
I
It's not
see.
practical. So
Mm.
at certain levels of cost, and this isn't just for cost. This is also for context windows. This is also for like few shot example, like reasoning ability. This is like for size and capability in general. There's different brackets of capability where it's like, oh, this is in this bracket, and this bracket. I want to use it. And my task is like this. Okay, I guess I'll pick the best model that matches all these brackets. Um, so you're explaining for like writing copy.
Hmm.
In that case, it's like something that you're well, if you're using agent system, then it needs to probably have strong zero shot performance. So Llama 3 has very strong zero shot performance, and if it's writing a lot of copy, then
Hmm.
Llama 370B is a good viable option for that.
Hmm.
Um, if it's for a simple task that not even simple, if it's for a task that you're repeating a lot of times,
Hmm.
then open source models are definitely the way to go. And the same kind of task because you
Got it.
can write like 2 or 3 few-shot examples and get superior performance to closed source for the reason of model flexibility. So
Mm.
closed source models tend to be inflexible. And by
Yes.
inflexible, I mean they're stubborn. They rely on their training data more than they rely on the prompt that you're giving them to an extent.
Hmm.
So GPT's style, like so-called GPT isms. I
Hmm.
know many businesses that can't use GPT because it obviously sounds like GPT. Um,
Right.
Open models have this, like hell, Paul Graham won't accept your project proposals if you
Let's
use the word
delve
delve.
into, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was a hilarious meme for a while.
Oh, that's
Oh
so
yeah,
good. Oh, that's so
yeah.
good. So I guess my other question to you, just getting a little
Hmm.
technical here on the prompting side, um, if I give it a couple of examples, do those examples influence the output in the future? So like, for example, if I just give it to like teenage TikTok type of users, and then I repeat that prompt, but then I want someone who's like a retiree or something, is it still going to be able to fill in the details for that? Or do I have to give it examples specific to the demographic that I want the output for?
Now that's the great thing with the great thing about models is that they're kind of like code but smart. So
Right.
they can handle edge cases by default, especially if it's a good model.
Okay.
So in that case where you describe it, say, oh, I have these two things where it's like this category is shared between them. Will it be able to generalize to a second category? In most cases, if the model is good, yes.
Mm.
The power of few shot examples is that they're absolutely magnificent for having consistent output formats. You will rarely have problems parsing your LLM outputs with code if you use open models, which makes things very painless. And secondly, they're also very good for constraining style. Open models are very flexible and unpretentious with
Hmm.
their writing, at least compared to GPT. And if the examples are like tens of thousands of tokens long, which they can get up to, I've written 15,000 token prompts before, most of those are examples, then they can actually start to pick up on your writing style, which
Hmm.
GPT does not do. No matter how much text you give it, it resolutely and suddenly sounds like itself. It's very independent, good for it, but not terribly good if you want to have your brand have a specific voice, for instance. So you were mentioning for copywriting,
Yes.
people have a good nose for
Hmm.
AI writing.
Hmm.
Um,
That's right.
if you
Yeah.
have a bunch
You
of
see it a
copy all
lot.
over your page and
Yeah.
it's AI written and it's GPT written specifically, that's a
Yeah.
problem. But if you use open models, not only can you influence its writing by giving it many few shot examples where you have written the text, just copy
Hmm.
pasting stuff. Like if you have a blog post, like copy that into the assistant message and then make the user message write a blog post that contains the following information. That is a valid example if you want like a generalist
Mm.
writing prompt. Few shot
That's
examples don't
cool.
need to be for a specific task. They can
Uh,
generalize too.
that's
Um,
cool.
so
Yeah,
that's
just
one option.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
just want to give people a heads up real quick for anyone who's just recently joined. We're just basically talking about AI prompting, and I'm here with Evan Armstrong, who's actually the author of the Augment Toolkit and helps basically convert like compute and books into instruct tuning data sets. So this is definitely a little more on the technical side, which is kind of fun sometimes to get into like the AI engineering space. And if you're an enthusiast and an entrepreneur, this is kind of also for you, as we're kind of talking about a little bit of different ways to kind of figure out, I'm a user, I want to use AI, I'm already doing some prompting, but I've heard of these open models and maybe want to take this to the next level. And I feel like Evan is I've seen him online and posts, and we've been in various X spaces talking about prompting and all kinds of things in the middle of the night. So this has just been really fun. I thought we'd just kind of take this, and I also actually inviting you on the audience. So just feel free to type into the comments, and they'll come bubble up, and I'll just pop over that question so that we can ask it live. And whatever questions you have for Evan, please feel free to participate. This is your type of stream as well, and I'm really enjoying this live stream format. And as we kind of wait for questions and stuff to come in, I guess my other question for you was just more about how do you go about debugging a prompt? Like,
ah, that's a good one. Yeah. So
yeah.
prompts are like code in that most of the time you spend working on them will be fixing them, not writing them in the first place. This goes even for 10,000 token prompts. If it's a very long prompt, it will take probably multiple days to get right. One criticism levied at prompt engineering is that it's a very inelegant process where you like use the magic words, think step by step, and combine a few of the things from a few of the preprints and just slap that onto a prompt, and you get improved performance. Uh, that's that if the prompting were that, then yes, it would be inelegant. But once you get into open source models, you lose BS like that. Systematically debugging a prompt relies on the principle. I don't know if I'm the progenitor of this, but consistent behavior has a specific cause. So if your model is doing the same thing over and over again, something is causing it to do that. Whether it's in the prompt or the training data is a good question. Often, if it's an open source model, you can count on it being in the prompt. If it's closed source, it's often the training data. That's why I like to use open models for production they're more customizable. So what do I mean? How do you apply this to debugging? So consistent behavior having a specific cause is great if the behavior is what you want. If it consistently does something that you don't want, then the application of that principle is to look for something in the prompt that even tangentially could be related to the problem. Try removing it, and then iterate. And so there are many ways this can be applied. You can like change the inputs. You can apply post and pre-processing, et cetera, et cetera. There are tons of different. This is like the foundation of a lot of prompting that I do. But
Yeah, I would
the
also
most
add a
core
little
thing
bit.
is remove the problematic things. I have an example if you want me to walk through.
Yeah, I wanted to add on top of this because there are a couple of ways that I've been kind of drafting prompts, and some of them I just literally have a window up and I'm talking to the language model and generating output. But another step is like what happens when you give that output to a framework and then that framework does the prompting on your behalf. So I think what sometimes people forget is that those frameworks sometimes take your prompt and then add extra strings either to the beginning, to the end, or they do some other type of manipulation of your actual text before they pass it on to the language model. So you actually sometimes, maybe kind of, I always try to say keep it simple, stupid, which means like if you can remove those steps along the way and say, hey, let's just go back to the basic text. Is my text still working okay to debug your prompt? That will get you in saying, hey, the way that this framework is currently sending information into the prompt, into the language model is actually, that behavior has changed, can give you a big clue. And another thing that a lot of people don't realize as well is the fact that language models actually change. Even though the name and all that, the actual name and stuff has never changed at all. So underneath the hood, they could have made some changes to the language model, but it still has the same name, GPT-4, GPT-4 Turbo, GPT whatever. But they've actually made some
Yeah.
changes, and there's no standard right now on
Yeah,
that.
they nerfed Opus if I remember right. So like they push updates silently. It'd be bad
Yes,
for
and they'll
production.
they'll
That's
still
all.
keep the same name. So just for folks to be aware, and that's kind of why being a little bit aware of how when you put the text in, is it going into a system? Is it going into an agent system? Step through the code a little bit and see where, are they actually injecting or manipulating your prompt before they feed the final response back into the language model. So like just knowing those steps along the way, you can kind of get a better sense of what you're getting into from a debugging standpoint, because I feel like that's pretty interesting. I kind of wanted to hop into the next topic of like synthetic data generation, because that's sort of become a hot topic in the OpenAI space, because they and other people who are making models too, they feel like they have to generate different types of data to get some more rich outputs. And to me, that's almost like simulating different worlds of things so that their model can actually be more creative and they actually can pull across different types of concepts that either existed or didn't exist before. So when you ask it to do more things, it sort of feels like it's more complete, or kind of can feel different things by its behavior. And that's just my interpretation. I really don't know, but that would just love to hear what your thoughts are on, just what is synthetic data generation? Have you been doing it yourself? And
Have I
just any input.
been? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
I was like,
when I
yeah, I
said
kind of
this,
do
like
that all the
when I
time.
said, yeah. I mean, look. So the reason why I do all the synthetic data stuff is because I originally wanted to create models, and so I went and like trained my QLore like randomly after doing a bunch of courses and stuff. But I realized very quickly I needed data for the models I was creating, and so then I got into prompting GPT for model creation, and then the bill for using GPT at scale quickly got very high. So then I switched to open source, and from there Augtokit was born. That's the whole story. I'm not going to go into like super plugging myself. Your question of like what is synthetic data, how do we use it? It's interesting that you mentioned allowing more creativity, because I don't. So there are a few schools of synthetic data generation, right? There's well, this is entirely my own opinion. A great quote I like, because I'm not an expert, is that in this field there are no experts, only pioneers. So I consider myself a pioneer. I'm not going to call myself an expert. I see there as being, in my opinion, three schools of synthetic data generation. There's annotated data, there is synthetic data, and then there is augmented data. So annotated data is where you have like some human written text, and you want to find and you get AI to generate like instructions that could have produced that text, and then you fine tune on the human written text. So if I have a bunch of tweets, I might scrape all the tweets and then have an AI generate for each tweet, write a tweet about prompt engineering, and then train on the human written tweet about prompt engineering, rather than so that's annotated data. You create AI annotations in the train of the human text. Synthetic data is kind of what I think you were mostly describing, Ray. It's like where where the only input to the AI is the prompt. You like to generate a short story about, I don't know, prompt engineering. It's the topic of the day. And so then you have like repeat that a bunch of times for a bunch of different prompts, and then you get a large data set. However, synthetic data doesn't really introduce, just before we go into breadth first and depth. And augmented data is where you take like some source text and you use it to you generate synthetic data, but based on that raw information. And then you train on the synthetic outputs. So it's like annotated data, but you have control over the output format. You can teach it new things and align its style. So those two things, teach it new things and align its style. Annotated data, it does align its style to the style of the human written stuff. It mostly teaches it new things in a way. At least synthetic data doesn't incorporate any raw information, like pure synthetic data doesn't incorporate any like input information. So it's really more for aligning the style of the outputs to a more constrained and confined output format, I find in my personal experience working with it. If you're using the model, like a model and trying to bootstrap more synthetic data for itself, it's difficult to get more creative from that because you're generating a bunch of a specific kind of output and then fine-tuning on that only. So you're kind of narrowing it down, which is very useful for a lot of use cases. I've been working on that occasionally. But like if you want like a narrow AI, then that's good for creating data that is focused on narrow use cases. Alignment, like output format, like following a script, that kind of thing specifically. But if you're using the same, like, and you can also use synthetic data as like an instructor, a large model teaching a smaller model stuff. That also works.
Wow.
But if you are, and so in that case, it can, yes, it can make it more creative. It can teach a wider variety of things. But in the case of a model bootstrapping more data for itself, if there's no input, if the only input is the prompt, and that's the same input over and over again at a potentially huge scale, then you're going to narrow the range of outputs rather than broaden it, which is, again, probably beneficial because in most cases, if you're fine-tuning something, you want a specific use case, not a generalist.
Oh, that's really quite a bit to take in.
Sorry.
And no, I think there's just a lot of like it's a huge realm, and like you said, it's like pioneering right now, and everyone is trying different things, and it's important to try those different things and so forth. And it looks like we also have some John. Hey, hi, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. Anyone, if you're welcome to comment, just drop some comments. If you have any questions for Evan and myself, I think this is a good opportunity to drop in and say hello and even just a shout out and stuff, just because we welcome you. This is part of the community. We're here as engineers trying to learn AI together and also have to put on different hats at various times to try different things. And so I guess I also wanted to ask you, like, what is Augtokit? How did it kind of like come about? How is it kind of helping you or others in this current space?
Yeah, good question. So Augtokit, I mentioned earlier that I was suffering from a high OpenAI bill. Augtokit was the kind of natural evolution of some of my earlier experiments at first, where I was like, okay, I'm generating data with OpenAI. Can I do it with open source models? And I ended up generating factual data at decent scale, like it's actually, like I mentioned the cost per token earlier. It's very low for the. So I generated data with open source models, factual data, so question answer type stuff, and it ended up working very well for some unexpected reasons. So once the open source prompting is a whole beast. We talked about that already, but Augtokit works nicely for data generation because in using open source models, it doesn't double down on GPT-isms, on GPT's writing style. And in fact, so fine-tuning is good for two things, really. Good for a lot. But two things specifically the prompting really struggles with. And those are, in my opinion, Teaching models information, believe it or not, contrary to popular belief, you can teach models new information with instruct tuning. Llama 3 is proof of that. They fine-tuned on 10 million tokens and learn new stuff. That's a myth that you can't teach things with fine tuning. And secondly, style. So even with open source models where they do pick up on your style a bit, you can completely change the style of a model with fine tuning. So right there, that's great for business because you have branding and you have knowledge base or niche. So so it's Augtokit started out as an open source thing just to see if I could take my OpenAI data generation to open source.
Wow.
And that experiment succeeded. And then
Sweet.
I was like, hold on a second, this might be really useful to a lot of people out there who are building products. And so I pivoted. I wanted to develop Augtokit more. I really believe in the idea, and so I've been working on various versions for a handful of businesses out there who want to create custom chatbots. And so I mentioned the cost earlier.
They could just go right into the GitHub. And,
they could.
Oh, awesome!
They could
drop that into
but
the
yeah,
chat
it's open source.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
the barrier to entry is low. For a production ready data set, it costs usually less than $30. $30,
amazing.
like 30. Training a model, even full fine tune, is $10. So you can iterate. If your knowledge updates, you can update the model for next to no cost, very fast.
Okay. So in an example use case, let's just say you have a warehouse that has lots of types of manuals and various instructions and things and processes and SOPs, and they come to you saying, hey, how do we use this thing? What's the best way to do? They just reach out to you, or what's their they want to put AI into their business and they have a little bit of budget set aside, but they want to get this going.
The Augtokit repo has my contacts. If you're interested in having a custom version of it built for your specific business needs, you can reach out to me there. The Augtokit is one annoying thing about it is that it does for very new use cases, or even if you just want production grade performance, it does require some modification. I haven't solved making it generalist yet. So so you need to tweak it a bit, the prompts and sometimes some of the code. The advantage of that is complete flexibility. You can pass it JSON. If you have a backend, you can make a custom model based on that information. But it does sometimes require some modification if you want a custom chatbot. And so that's what I'm doing on the side as I work on Augtokit.
Okay.
I eat the cost.
They could definitely reach out to you, but it's very extendable. Looks like it could just do some also real hardcore stuff as well. And I think you also write some stuff. I know you have a Substack here about called Prompting Weekly, right? And this has your weekly thoughts on how you approach things here as well. And
that's really it. I didn't actually originally intend to make that a big thing. It was really just for me to kind of hold myself accountable and force myself to learn, because now I have to share my thoughts weekly on something. I better have something interesting to share on a weekly basis. So that's what that is for. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Occasionally, also content creation, because I tell Augtokit started as open source, but now it's kind of a business. So.
That's awesome. We're really kind of tapping into the tip of the iceberg here with some of these models, and just kind of getting your feet wet a little bit of how some of this stuff is, and a lot of the quirks that are out there. And I don't know, is there a quick use case of something that you can share where a client has come to you with a problem and you help solve it, and kind of what decisions you made and kind of why? It would be kind of really interesting here.
I can't go super in depth because of NDAs, but generally I can mention, company named Admetrics, a German marketing SaaS company, came to me. They had some information locked in the backend. They wanted to make a model that could basically talk about their niche, their service, and reason with the information. So I quickly whipped up a custom version of Augtokit for them. Data goes in, raw data goes in, instructor data set goes out, and now they have a model that they're very happy with. Still working with them on various things, and it's been a very good relationship so far. But that's the kind of typical use case. So you have a SaaS, users are interacting with this thing. You want a model that can help take it to the next level, make use of this excellent, wonderful new technology that came out. And Augmentuka lets you capitalize on all the information that you've gathered. Also very useful if you have a business in a niche that models don't know much about. So like if I was making a prompt engineering service,
Yeah.
something say, it's very new. AI does not know much about prompt engineering from its pre-training. So
Right.
if I gathered a bunch of information on prompt engineering and then ran Augmentuka on that, so customized it and then ran it, then I could have a model that could talk as an expert about that information. Now,
Okay.
you'll want, in my experience, you'll want some grounding too. So here's the thing: it's like one common misconception is like RAG versus fine tuning. When do you use which? Um, you need to grounding helps. It's like it's even if you are an expert in physics, say, it helps to have a textbook open if you're being quizzed about specific things.
I
So
see.
it's less either or, more you can improve on RAG performance by applying fine tuning. Specifically, lots of things I've found, like when I'm running Augmentuka on, or just any kind of synthetic data generation on like my own stuff, it helps the model like reason about the information that RAG has retrieved better. So it acts as a force multiplier in your RAG system, which
Got
is
it.
like it's surprising how much like of a bird's eye view it gives it of the information. I fine-tuned the model on my own writing, and it was able to talk about like compare and contrast things that it
That's
hadn't been
cool.
explicitly trained to do, but it was very surprising, like emergent behavior right there.
That's awesome. So you're also saying like, let's just say I want to keep my data sets private and I just want to run everything
Yeah,
on my own thing because I have like financial information and maybe I'm dealing with like I'm a law firm and I have a bunch of people's like wills and various things and I want to have like sort of this system where I can just kind of tap in and say, did we ever go over that use case with this family? Or when was the last time that this person, passed on? Or we did some really complex thing. Can you tell me about that? So I should be able to take this like, you know, PDFs and all these different emails and conversations and things and sort of export them into some type of text database or some type of database file, run it through your Augment toolkit, and I should sort of be able to get information back from like my whole thing while keeping it offline,
yeah,
basically.
like Augment Toolkit. So that's one of the huge benefits, like privacy and such. But yeah, Augment Toolkit is teaches a model to talk about information. It's difficult to just pre-train a model on
Right.
new information because then it doesn't learn how to talk about that. If you just feed in the raw manual, like how it's the task of talking about some information that you train on is not something that you'll typically have data for. You might have the raw and structured stuff, but the like models don't. If you're interacting with it, you'll get very inconsistent results. Just continuing pre-training on an instruct model using pre-trained data. Yes, it will be uploaded after. I believe
Yes.
Ray
Yeah.
has a
So
YouTube channel. You can check that
yeah,
out.
FUPS, yes, or FUPS. Yeah, this is actually a recorded stream, which is nice. So if you're tuning in on X, you'll be able to find that on YouTube, which is at Ray Fernando 1337, and
Oh,
also
yep.
on yeah, yeah.
Camera switch.
Yeah, right down there. So if you're on YouTube, this is already streaming, but this will just be staying on live. So I really appreciate that. Appreciate everyone tuning in as well. And perfect, thanks. Wish I could keep watching. Totally get it. Yes, EU time. I'm trying to change that. I'm currently in Hawaii, so you guys are way over there, and sunlight is just barely happening. It's 12 here, but I also do appreciate you tuning in, and we'll have more of this types of content as well, and make sure you subscribe. It looks like you're on YouTube as well, and hit that little bell button icon. Pimping all of our different addresses here. So I definitely appreciate you just even tuning in from in Europe, and that speaks volumes a lot. And we're here connecting worldwide with every one of you, and just appreciate everything we've been doing so far in the show. And this is just a little bit of us getting started a little bit and getting our feet wet. And I myself, Ray, am an AI. I consider myself an AI entrepreneur, which means I wear a lot of hats. I wear the engineering hat, I wear the marketing hat, I wear all these different types of things. I'm just trying to launch my products to get out from from an idea to is someone going to be willing to buy it, because there's a lot of different problems to solve. And I spend my time here reaching out to various people in the AI space, and I'm also based out of the Bay Area as well. So when I go to the Bay Area, I'll get to meet more people who are like actively building and doing things. But at the same time, we're a totally interconnected world. So I met Evan online through an X space, and we connected, and I went crazy talking prompting. I was like, okay, we should do something where we go live and talk a little bit about some structure of something, and make it a little bit more official, and also record it so that people can ask questions and then later on
Benefit,
keep
yeah.
referencing and so forth. So no, I definitely appreciate you coming onto the show. I feel like we can kind of launch into this for hours and days, and I think there's also more coding and stuff to do. But I also want to let users know that where they should probably best reach out to you, to either schedule some time to be with you, talk with you, or even find you email, social media, whatever types of things. So please feel free to like let them know.
Okay, yeah, sure. So, like from myself? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Augment Toolkit, the repo, just Augment Toolkit, just search that, one word. The bottom of the repo has all my contacts. If you're the business and want to do stuff, I do it fast. I have a money back guarantee, so if you don't like the final result, you get all your money back. Just let's talk about your specific needs. But for everyone else, just enjoy the open source project. It's the trick is modifying it for your own custom use case. Prompting open source models, we talked a bit about that. There's an art to it. It's more scientific than prompting closed source models, but yeah, it's a thing to figure out. So it's great. So I'm decent at that. But my contacts are at the bottom. Even if you're not a business, feel free to reach out. I have tons of Discord, LinkedIn, whatever. I love talking with people about AI, data generation. This is the most fun field to be in. I'm so glad I found AI. Like,
It's
I don't know if I
great.
would have
Yeah.
continued programming if I hadn't found AI. It's so fun.
And the way you can find Evan, if you're on X with his handle, is at E_P_Armstrong, which you can see down below. Make sure to give him a follow, say hello, and just give a shout out saying, hey, saw you on the stream. Yeah, and so forth. So that's what we're all about, keeping the vibes up here, and appreciate you tuning in. And you can find me at RayFernando1337 on Twitch, on YouTube, and also on X as well. And feel free to hit that little bell icon for the notifications and various things. And yeah, just appreciate you coming on the show, Evan. This is really great. I'm trying to do more of these live streams, and you're kind of some of my first guests, actually probably my first like official guest as an interview. And so I really appreciate that. And yeah, look forward to connecting with you more. Make sure anyone who's online and checking this stuff out, check out Augment Toolkit. Really awesome stuff. Evan, wonderful human being. I really appreciate you
Thanks
being
for having
here.
me.
And I look forward to everyone else so that we can all build together and prosper in AI. All right, Chad. We'll,
Yeah.
we'll catch you later. Peace.
All right.